oscillating isometric muscle actions, OIMAs.
Hmm.
Okay, so we wrote an article about this where the PIMAs are essentially going to be more top-down and neurological in nature, and the HIMAs
Hmm.
are going to be more biological and bottom-up in nature. And then where the two synthesize. So for individuals that have taken the learning module or they understand the inside-out model of special strengths, the mental model, not the
Hmm.
definition, which
Hmm.
is that's
Hmm.
important to delineate. Because if you want to program for something, you have to have a mental model for how to get there, which maybe that's a topic in and of its own. But essentially, oscillating isometric muscle actions is the in between of those two things.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. And we were kind of having a discussion before this video started on how HIMAs and PIMAs are foundational in programming, in a programming strategy for reactive strength.
Yes.
Okay. Oscillating isometric muscle actions, would you consider those to be also foundational? I mean, I know this is like it's a new class of isometrics, but let me just say this because clinically, I use oscillating isometric muscle actions a lot.
Sure.
Okay,
Sure.
like every like like I don't know like we wrote an article on essentially treating and training reactive strength where it's
Hmm.
like PIMAs, HEMAs, and OIMAs. And also, like, we have a conjugate strategy, which means we're running multiple things concurrently. And I
Hmm.
feel like if you're running the HEMAs and the PIMAs, which you should be, that then
Hmm.
it's only logical that then you do the oscillating isometric muscle actions as part of that,
Hmm.
right? And then
Hmm.
and this is what I think, okay? And this is just from my personal experience of treatment and training, right?
Sure.
So there's no evidence-based stuff other than that. So I kind of want to be clear with that, right? Okay. But when oscillating isometric muscle actions start to come into the picture, I feel
Hmm.
like what ends up happening because of how I think about it is the neural network of absolute strength and the connective tissue network that's the bottom up element of reactive strength. When they start to sync up and synergize, I feel like it pushes, I feel like the timelines, and actually multiple people have told me this, that
Okay.
it's decreasing the timelines in return to performance.
Interesting.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
And and let me run this by you. And if you disagree, please let me know because I've just been thinking about it because like I said, the results that I'm getting like from them and the
Hmm.
athletes that are getting is significantly they're super high. Like they're really
Hmm.
good.
Hmm.
Okay, do you think because think about it, if we have the internal isometric continuum, right? And we understand that, from like, let's say 1% effort to 80% effort, it's more biological. And
Sure.
from like 80 above is more neurological,
Hmm.
right? And
Hmm.
and those are going to be more pressing efforts. And the pressing
Sure.
efforts are going to be external for the neural network, whereas the coaching cues are going to be tissue based for that. Don't you think that like meeting in between, like because the PIMAs are going to drive neural adaptation,
Sure.
but the HEMAs are going to drive more biological adaptation.
Sure.
Okay, so that means if you're running oscillatory isometric muscle actions, you may not be cultivating more connective tissue and you may not be getting more neurology, but are you creating better self-organizing behavior of the current connective tissue architecture that is there to be able to dampen the oscillation?
Yes, of course. Of course. So
Okay,
I think so maybe then I think what we can establish here is that let's put those three things in a group. Okay. So
okay,
let's say those are because they are in a group. For us, those are like sort of like uh baseline categories of exercise inputs for I shouldn't say baseline. Um Not baseline. What's the word I'm looking for? Like foundational
foundational,
input, yeah,
yeah,
foundational inputs for the building of reactive strength or maintaining a level of reactive strength. So I think what we could probably establish is that if there's a group of three there, that, to your point, they are always occurring. So they're always going to be embedded in the program at some level. And depending upon where the athlete is in their performance, so whether that is like post-injury, or maybe they're in a rehabilitation phase, or maybe they're out for some other reason, but we're building reactive strength in an associated anatomical compartment, versus someone who is otherwise healthy from a injury perspective, but is just trying to acquire more reactive strength. I think those three foundational inputs are always existing in on those continuums. The percentage amounts of each one is going to vary depending upon where the athlete is. Do you know what I'm saying? So like obviously if your initial stages of injury rehabilitation, you have to create, like if you go to those three things as the foundation, obviously the goal there would be to create the web of connective tissue first. So you're probably going to be, if you think about like the 80-20 rule, I guess, 80, 80% of your efforts are going to be based on um, uh, HIMAs, biological adaptation at that point. And then, you know, the other 20% could be divided amongst like low level oscillation and maybe some lower level PIMA based inputs. But then as progression occurs, it's still kind of the same rule, but the amount of what input is occurring is going to change. Is that
Mhm.
is that kind of along the same
Yeah,
lines as what you're thinking?
yeah, it is. It is. Okay, so let me ask you this because I may be not thinking about this correctly, but you know how we have the neural network of absolute strength? And
Hmm.
like one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to add more nodes
Hmm.
into like when we train absolute strength at a stimulating intensity, we're trying
Hmm.
to like literally add more nodes into the network,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? But then you can also be at a retaining intensity where we're just trying to hold the neural network in place,
Hmm.
right? So that those nodes don't get pruned out.
Certainly.
Okay, so if you start to think about like connective tissue and like you're the person to answer this because I don't know, because this is how I think about it. Okay, if you have an individual that you know is essentially not at point B reactive strength, so they're in specifically in the bottom up element, you got me. So it's
Hmm.
like you know that you have to add more nodes to the network, right? Like you have to add more nodes to that network. But what about the network that's there? Even if it's like disorganized or suboptimal, right? Do you think that this is what I think? This is what I think is occurring. I think that when I start to do the oscillatory isometric muscle actions, right? And I'm like coaching them, hey, can you press and dampen the oscillation? I think that the pre-existing connective tissue nodes that are in the connective tissue network start to better self-organize to create that damping effect. Does this make sense? And so it's not going to add more nodes to the network, but even if the network is like, let's say suboptimal, it gets it to self-organize a little bit better. And being able to organize a little bit better and to be able to dampen, I think then enables you to have better HEMAs, better PIMAs, right? Because if they feel the self-organizing, the damping effect, if they can feel that in the connective tissue, then you can start to coach them using the internal isometric continuum to be like, hey, can you hold into where you feel that? And now I feel like the HEMAs now, like you're getting more out of the HEMAs.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great anecdotal addition there. So what does it tell us? So does it tell us, yeah, what do you think it tells us?
I
Do
think
you
it
think that
tells,
that tells us that we could probably, so let's get back to the discussion. Hold that for a second. Let's get back to the discussion because realistically, if you were to think about this like at a very um like baseline level, like you could at for anyone be programming HIMAs to to uh to create better architecture in the connective tissue and that baseline stiffness. Um, like those could be never ending, is what I'm
yeah.
saying. So like the idea is we have to create a scenario whereby we know how to make those maybe a little bit more specific. And I think this is maybe something that would be beneficial for a lot of people in their programming, just because the addition of HEMAs or in FRS land, like Pale's contractions, like I said, like it's the idea initially is we'll just keep doing them and at different lines of tissue and you know the benefit should scale across different lines of tissue. But when you think about it from an anatomical perspective, there is in a lot of like big anatomical areas, there's just so much tissue. So like how do we know where to go, what angle to do them at, um, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So if I'm kind of interpreting a little bit of what you're saying, and again, I could be off base here, you can use, and you are currently using the oscillatory isometric muscle action to have the client at a particular angle that is chosen by you based on information that you currently have, to then ask them to dampen or create like a damping effect in the tissue to against the oscillation. And then maybe that gives you an indication of where they are still kind of stress shielding,
Hmm.
because they might say like I might I might feel it a little bit. I'm using it like a hypothetical example here, but let's say we're doing it in a hamstring, for example, and you have just a straight